This week on the Nittany Dispatch, we discuss the Beaver Stadium renovation, James Franklin being made available, as well as his assistant coaches. This week on the Nittany Dispatch. Hello and welcome to the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Faber of the Center Daily Times. She's Audrey Snyder of the New York Times /Athletic. I feel like we should start with that introduction now.
Sure.
Audrey, it's been a minute, but the things they keep on happening, specifically with the old big building there, the old steel beams.
Yeah. Happy mid-June. This is our I want to say our midsummer update, but you're probably gonna make fun of me because it's not technically summer yet. But yeah, I was on vacation during the Beaver Stadium renovation. Literally was in the Caribbean, sitting outside during a highly entertaining Zoom call about the Beaver Stadium renovation, and then shut my laptop down and didn't look at anything for 2 weeks. And then came back to town, and here we are. We're recording this Thursday, June 13th, where we've spoken to Penn State's coordinators, assistant coaches. Lift for Life was happening today. Chuck Losey talked. John, you've got a new Zoom background.
Yeah,
Or whatever we call
Zoom.
this.
I was gonna say we use
Sorry,
StreamYard. No free advertising. We use StreamYard. But no, you mentioned you were on vacation. I am on vacation. So this never really goes the way we want to. I'm of course I am who I am, going on a golf trip with some friends. Excited for that this weekend. But we figured before I do that, we needed to talk some Beaver Stadium, and
long overdue.
This is interesting, right? Like, we hadn't seen any renderings, anything real since the facilities master plan, which, by the way, in case you didn't know, you can throw out. That is not even something they're drawing from for something like this. But we saw a rendering, and now they made it very clear that it is not necessarily what it's going to look like.
It is indeed just a rendering that we saw.
Yeah, but it does, I think, give some insight into this is going to look modern. You know what I mean? It's not going to be the, apologies to those who like it, but the ugly facade of the steel beams that we always see.
I think it's yes.
Yeah, it just looks, I don't know. It's such a great stadium. I think we can agree on that from an objective point of view here. Neither of us are fans, but like, I think the stadium itself is awesome, despite the press box being terrible.
We'll get to that.
Yes, we will. But I think the aesthetic, the outside, like, they've needed some sort of shell, some sort of like the way they're making this a welcome center, which is something that we had not known about until it was publicly made available. That this is going to be like they called it, I think, the front door to the university, right? They want visits to happen here. They want students to stop in here, and this to be like where they map out their visit and stuff like that. And I think that's for prospective students and for Penn State, like, people should be excited about that. Like, that building has needed modernization for a long time, and it's finally seemingly underway.
Yeah, and it's actually, driving over to campus today for the media sessions over in Haluba and Lash. And I mean, there is visible construction, right? I know a lot of our listeners, Penn State fans, right? Not everybody's concentrated here in State College. But there is stuff going on. I mean, you can see, I actually saw today, like, the steel beams to reinforce the new video board, because there is one new video board that you will notice this football season. And then they're going to eventually do the other one as well, but they didn't want to do two at once in case something would go wrong, because I'm sure that would not cause any overreactions of, oh my God, we can't see any replays. But so, like, you can see stuff. I mean, there's a road closure, like normally where the team comes through, they're working on stuff there. So I think the exciting part of this for fans is that after years of talking, of planning, of consultants, of plans, of a master plan, of wait, do we renovate? Do we rebuild?
30 surveys.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of surveys. You're finally going to see something, right? You're going to see changes. The most noticeable part, I think, for everybody is going to come after this football season. And that is when the press box side of the stadium, I'm so bad with directions on, like, north, south, east, west. So
the press box side is the west side.
West. Okay. So the press box side, also known as the west side, that's going to, of course, get renovated, which we knew for a while. That was kind of the plan. But again, they've got to work in pieces so the team can still play there during the season. I know I've gotten a lot of questions about what does this mean for people whose season tickets are on that side. And I'll reiterate, I've written about it a lot on The Athletic. I know you have as well at the CDT. They're trying, emphasis on trying, to have as few interruptions as possible, right? Like now, we all know in construction things happen, right? Like, I'm sure we're gonna throughout the process hear kind of some of these stories, but the goal is to kind of keep this as smooth, as seamless as possible, keep people in their seats. Eventually, though, the press box is getting taken down. This is our last year in the press box, which means, I don't know, John, like, can we buy the rickety stairs, or like, can
No,
we
no,
tailgate when they
I can't.
implode? Like,
I will watch those stairs implode.
mhm.
My hope with this renovation is that there is no exposed staircase, like just none. Just put a little walls around it. That's all. Just as long as you do that, I will be fine going up and down the
Yeah.
new stairs.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So that's going to ultimately become, the press box side is going to become like the nice suites. So we will be getting relocated, but I think there's going to be, I'm just kind of curious to see how it plays out at the end of this season. Like, what is the mood going into that last game? Whether it's a playoff game, whether it is, gosh, I think Maryland is the last home game this
Well,
year.
that's I think that's one of those things that could be really awkward, right? If it's
Hmm.
a
Wait
I
and
don't mean to,
see. Yeah.
yeah, throw the bad luck onto Penn State, but like if it's a, home playoff game, they're a 5 through 8 seed and they like lose and it's this last game and what it looked like, you know what I mean? Like it could be a very awkward type thing where it's going to be very different the
Yeah, the
next time they come
fans
around.
will
It's like,
will angrily say, "Tear it down," and
yeah,
they'll
but
actually
like
be doing that,
I
yeah.
think a lot of people will want like the nostalgia and everything, and then I'm
Mhm.
sure it would be harder to embrace that if Penn State loses or what have you. So yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see. Like you said, there's a chance that the last game is just the final regular season home game, and it can go out sort of with a presumably a win against a school
But
like Maryland, but you never know.
we need to look into this, John. We need to ask if we can tailgate for the tear down of the press
I do
box.
not need to ask. I will be there tailgating the teardown of the press
It'll
box.
probably be like a random Tuesday, and you'll just see
Yes,
us drinking in the parking lot, and I'm sure
I
campus
got
police
vacation
will
days.
be.
We'll,
Yeah.
we'll, we'll use one explicitly for that purpose. I assure you.
Yeah, I like that. We're gonna put that. We don't know, again. We don't know dates. We know it'll be after the season when that happens, but that's certainly going to be circled on our calendars. I will say, when I saw that rendering, my first initial reaction to the stadium rendering, and I don't know if you had this or not because we didn't. Again, I was literally getting ready to go to a beach, and I saw it, and my first thought was, "Oh my god, this looks like Lincoln Financial Field." Did you have that same reaction, or is that just me?
I think it's just you. I
Okay.
still, it's very funny when I think of the link. I think of the windmills that are gone, right? That
Mhm.
that were on
Yeah,
top
yeah,
of the
yeah.
stadium, which were not in that rendering. But yeah, I don't know. I thought of like it looked to me like and I guess this is probably the reason it looked like that, like just like a regular modern campus building. You know what I mean? Because in the rendering, you can really only see that west side. You don't get like I don't think
Mhm.
anybody's, at least I didn't notice it.
Yeah, you just that
You can see
yeah, just that
you
one
can't
side.
see the curvature of like the north and south sides. So it looks like just like a square building almost. And like I said, I think that's kind of what you want it to look like at this point. They need something like that. Either way, like I would venture to guess it's not going to look exactly like that, right? I would be stunned if it
No,
did. It's
yeah.
really hard to make it look exactly like the rendering, but I think if
And
you're
does it even look ultimately anything close to that? We'll see,
right,
right?
like
I
that's
mean,
the
that's
thing.
the other
But
part.
I think the general idea of it will probably be correct, like modern building rather than big steel structure.
Nice
And
bathrooms, functioning Wi-Fi, right? Like all these basic amenities. I saw some images circulating of the trough, for lack of a better
yes,
term,
yes, yes,
getting
yes.
removed.
The
I'm
urinal
sure
trough, yeah.
you talk about some nostalgia there for some fans.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure there are some real good stories there to be told. But yeah, I mean, I think it's anybody who has stepped foot in Beaver Stadium, and obviously, our audience. I'm sure many of you have, and you love the place, and you have an attachment to the place. And I think it's again the willingness to keep the capacity what it is, keep it the same. Quite frankly, if because someone asked me this on my mailbag on The Athletic, if it was up to me, would I renovate? Would I build a new? I'm gonna make a lot of enemies with this one. I say I would just, and again, I understand the financial ramifications that
Yes.
a full new stadium here was not in the cards, but I would just build it newer and or like all brand new. And what I would do is I would cut the capacity to about 85,000, which I know when you have a season ticket base of 90,000, I'm pissing off a lot of people right now. I just
And there go our
wonder.
listeners. That'll do it for this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, sorry about that. I again, just thinking aloud here because I do wonder why, and again, this is more philosophical probably. Why do we see NFL stadiums kind of cap their capacity at what it is in the 70s, 80s, where college has always been bigger, and is that long term going to hold? And could those 85,000 people have a better time in Beaver Stadium, hence less traffic problems if you cut the capacity? Again, this is just me brainstorming because this is June, and what else am I supposed to
Yeah.
do in June?
Well, I'm actually with you. I would have rebuilt the whole thing. Like I would have
Mhm.
built it. Now, to be clear, like you said, I don't think it would have been smart to rebuild it from a financial standpoint. But
Yeah,
if you're
like
taking
they
the
could
cost
not.
out of it,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
if you're taking the cost out of it, I would have rebuilt it. What they're doing is probably the right decision. We don't have access to all of the financials, but based
Mhm.
on their numbers, like it seems like that this is the best decision. Um, like I said, that is we're a little bit out of information deficit there because we don't know
Right.
what exactly that all entails. But yeah, I just think like they're kind of trying to modernize it, like, in a half measure almost, right? Because you're only doing the west side of the stadium. Like, a lot of people have said, like, "Oh, is this a full like, eventually, is it gonna be the east side too?" It's like, I don't know, right? Like, it might just be this, and
And
that
I
might be the
think
end of it.
so much too, John, is about crowd flow, right? And they refer to them as pinch points, right? Where you can't
Yes.
get all these fans in. And so widening the concourses, again, not a sexy thing, but that's a
No.
big part of this renovation. So again, these are things that you're going to notice. You can get in and out more freely. You can maybe get to your whiteout game, depending opponent time. Maybe a little bit easier. We can get into that later because I see that's become a talking point over the last couple weeks.
Yup.
But yeah, I just think it's been interesting, and I think it fans should be excited to finally get something noticeable changed with this stadium because it's long overdue. And that's probably I'm sure we can get more into the stadium and
Yeah,
further throughout
once
the off season. I mean, this like it's not going anywhere. We'll be talking about this for a long time.
yeah, especially as it goes through the stages of construction, but like you said, and like I mentioned in the intro, we did talk to James Franklin today. We did talk to the assistant coaches, all 10 technical assistant coaches, which does not include quarterbacks
Danny
coach
O'Brien.
Danny O'Brien.
Yeah.
So that isn't, I'll just leave that where it is.
I do wonder
Frustrating as it may be for us.
Are we I do wonder if we like because again, obviously the situation, it's Drew Aller, it's a big year. Like at some point, I mean, I sat down with Danny in the spring, but are we gonna get him? Hopefully, at some point we do again. Because I think
Yeah,
again,
that's what.
he means
So
a lot to this program.
yeah, I'm doing. I did a bunch of sit downs over the last couple of weeks, doing a series of stories. We already published for what it's worth stories on the last 10 years of James Franklin, talking a lot about his happiness, where he's at, how he views the last 10 years. You can find that at
Did
centerdaily.com.
you did you
But
ask him to rank his favorite memories of me through 10 years?
I did not. I should have. I
You
absolutely
should have.
should have.
Yeah. Maybe that's what I'll do
Yeah, I
this
was
summer.
gonna say you can make that request. We'll get him on here and have him do it.
That's a good
But
idea.
the I'm doing a story on Drew that'll be up here in probably in a few weeks. And I didn't request Danny because it's one of those weird situations where he's not technically an assistant coach. You know what I mean?
He's
It's
a grad
you
assistant who is
you
also the
know,
quarterback's coach.
yeah, and so I talked to Andy Kotelnicki, talked to Julian Fleming. Like I said, that there will be plenty of stories up on centerdaily.com over the next couple weeks. By the way, before I forget, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Leave us those 5-star ratings; they always help. Hit the subscribe button down below if you're watching on YouTube. We really appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up button. But yeah, like so, I had the sit that like when I was planning the story out, I was like, this is just a situation that I'm really not used to with
Mhm.
the quarterback's coach and ostensibly the guy working most with Drew Aller, not technically being an assistant coach.
Yeah, it's gonna make for some interesting times. I think again, because, just because we've heard so much about Danny and the guys all rave about him and recruits rave about him, it
Yeah,
is gonna be an interesting setup. But this, Thursday was also our first time collectively as a beat hearing from James Franklin since after the blue white game, which was like two
yes,
months ago, which is kind of crazy to believe because you fast forward 2 more months and we are back in it in August. Um, I thought it was kinda light on news on Thursday, right? Like, I don't think there was anything crazy.
yeah.
Drew
There were a couple
Shelton.
small things. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah,
Shelton
like, Drew
most notably.
Shelton's back healthy, so, obviously, very good sign to have your projected starting left tackle back after he was limited this spring. James Franklin, like the rest of you, like us, does not know when the whiteout's going to be. So, which again, at some point, we're going to get an announcement about that. And at some point, people are going to be mad. And at some point, some people are going to like it and others are going to hate it. And we can talk about that more then when it happens, because I think you and I both have some strong thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of hearing from James Franklin, it was just a lot of, I felt, housekeeping. Again, it was very nice to hear from him. I'm glad we did it. But there wasn't one of those things that I said, man, this was like the biggest takeaway from today. It's a lot of little things, which is good because the
Yeah.
little things add up to become the big things.
And it helps us clarify stuff on some level, right? And
Hmm.
it is today was one of those weird situations. So I talked to James for that story. I talked to him last Wednesday. So you mentioned it
Okay.
had been probably about a month and a half till we collectively did. But because I had just spoken to him, I got some of the stuff right that like some of the clarity I
Hmm.
needed, I got. So it's one of those weird things where, usually you and I will go in with a list of questions of things we want. And it's like, I got a lot of this out of the way. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
creates this weird dynamic where maybe there's just less to ask. And frankly, nothing has happened really other than Keandre Lambert Smith leaving. Nothing really has happened since the spring game. And so I think it creates this weird dynamic. But I thought it was interesting. He was, as you mentioned, pretty passionate about the whiteout and when it should be and everything. But I thought you mentioned Drew Shelton. I thought his mention of Javen Williams might have been maybe the
Hmm.
most important thing he said, and how he had earned playing time, and basically with the caveat that things can change. They still have. It's not even summer yet, technically, despite you and everyone else referring to this as summer.
Yeah. The
That's
people
not
that keep
even
track of the solstice, John's apparently one of them. I found that
the
out
people
today.
who keep track of the seasons and when they
Yeah.
actually are. Yes,
Hmm.
it's not summer yet, right? They got plenty of time for either Drew Shelton to have a stranglehold of the job or Javen Williams to maybe have an even bigger role. But James said that Javen has done enough to get reps and get experience out there. And listen, we don't know what that offensive tackle rotation is going to look like. I think we have a good idea of who's
I
going to
was
be
gonna say, I think
involved.
I got some tea
I
leaves
think
to read today on that. I talked
yeah,
to Phil
I
Troutman.
think we
Mhm.
have I think we have names. I think the distribution is probably going to be tough to figure out until we get into fall camp.
And I think even this is, again, like we've seen so many times where you want to have that other guy that swing tackle and you want to kind of work them in. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different when you open up on the road at West Virginia at noon. We do know that. That's
Yes.
come
No,
out.
that is another thing we learned.
Yes,
These
West
big noon
Virginia at noon.
kickoffs that everyone loves so much. And for what it's worth, I know fans don't seem to like them. Don't worry. I don't either. So, but that's more about my sleep schedule than anything else.
Yeah, there's a whole discourse on game times that we can get to
I think
this
that's a
off
good
season.
standalone episode. Yeah. When the
Oh yeah,
whiteout comes out.
but I do think that when you look at this offensive line group, right? And I think it's easy to forget maybe because again, I've got the cobwebs in my head, right? You take me away from this for 2 weeks, I like forget everything. Like I am one of those people that when you're not doing this every day, it's like I pretty much came back and you had to like reset my brain.
It's hard.
So,
Like I think it's one of those weird things, and I think this is true of
mhm.
writing too. Like this story I just did was it's really the first time I've really written something with real depth and since probably spring the team trials, the Olympic team trials,
Yeah,
and you're really trying to get in the swing of things. Like you said, like
it is
even
a real thing.
walking into Haluba Hall, it's like okay, like I guess we're doing this now, right? Like this is the part of the job we're at. Then we're going to take a month and a half where we don't talk to anyone again.
Yeah, I mean, when I was on vacation, I was in a pool and was talking to an Auburn like super fan. And again, we were like several minutes into this conversation when he mentioned Keandre Lambert Smith, and I hadn't even connected the dots,
Yeah,
right? I was
there's a
like,
name
oh
you
yeah.
hadn't heard in a while.
And so we talked about that. Then he's like, yeah, who is Penn State's offensive coordinator that they hired? And I blanked, and I was like, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, Andy Kotelnicki. Like you
Did you say
just
Mike Krzyzewski?
no, yes, Coach K. Yeah. But I mean, I think when you look at getting back in the swing of things, and we know that this offensive tackle, I don't even want to say situation, rotation, however it sorts itself out. Talking to Phil Troutwine, I fully got the impression, and again, I think this is going to hold true unless something crazy happens. Drew Shelton is their left tackle. Javen Williams is the backup left tackle who's going to push for reps. They're going to work Nolan Rucci on the left side and the right side with the chance to compete for that starting right spot. And oh, yeah, you've got the pleasant surprise of Anthony Donko and what he did in that Peach Bowl. And Phil Troutwine outlined that a little bit today. a little bit more and said he's like, you know what, that month leading into it, they knew that Caden Wallace was not going to play the full game, that he was kind of leaning that way. And Troutwine said he just put Donko out there in practice. And he goes, I won't tell you, I don't remember who the defensive end was, but he just absolutely shut him down. And from
I
there, it was
think
like, okay, we're going to do it.
I think Donka told it. You might have been there when we had the freshman
Back in the
media
winter.
availability. I think Donka, I'll have to go back and find this for next episode. I think Donka told us who it was. I
Uh-oh.
think there was someone that he beat, and I think he told us who it was. I don't
Here's
remember
the
who it
name.
was. I
Yeah.
don't want to.
We're
I
gonna
don't
have
want to
to check the
speculate.
notes.
Yeah, I'll check the notes on that. But no, I think like he's the surprise, but I think also by my eye, and again, we don't get access to a lot of practice. I think he's probably got the most upside of that bunch, right? Like of
Mhm.
the between him and Nolan Rucci and maybe even Drew
I'd say,
Shelton.
yeah, I think Williams,
Gavin
I think
Williams is
is going to
in
be,
William.
yeah.
Yeah, Williams is in the group with Donka. I think is having the highest
Mhm.
upside, but I think Donka is like really good. I am very curious to see how that plays out because they're probably, I would guess, they're going to have to rotate more than they have in years past. Not necessarily have to because they don't have the talent, but have to because they have too many guys that they, in this era, you got to keep guys happy. You got to get them on
Yeah.
the field, and I'm guessing we're going to see that quite a bit.
I think another situation, and you've been maybe ahead of the curve on this one, perhaps.
Oh, here it is. This
However,
is my
I
time to shine.
still I'm still waiting to
No,
see.
no, it's okay.
Give me to
Just,
August.
just go ahead
But
and say it. Get it out there.
Cooper Cousins
That's right.
rising up. The hype keeps building. This Phil Troutwine said today that he's like, yeah, this is one of the best, maybe the best freshman I've ever seen. So yes, there is legitimate consideration between Nick Dawkins, Cooper Cousins, and Vengo Wane for that starting center spot, which gets
Who could
really,
have
really
seen?
interesting.
Who could have seen this coming, Audrey? Who
You've
could have
you've been
possibly envisioned this?
you've been ahead of the curve on this, and
I like
I,
taking a
I
victory lap too.
still absolutely, and you should if you end
two
up being
two
right, this is going
people,
to be insufferable, but
two people on this podcast who love a good victory lap.
oh, absolutely love a good victory lap. And I do wonder how we see that shake out. Again, to me, it's still jarring that you have a true freshman in the conversation. But again, Cooper Cousins wasn't just any true freshman, right? And that's probably where I erred in my judgment initially, in that I still think, and always thought he's going to be really good. I thought the learning curve was going to be a little more steep, a little more significant, but physically he looks the part. And again, there's still a long ways to go. But that I thought was another interesting development talking with Phil Troutwine. Um, John, we also got to another one of your favorite
Well,
topics. Or is there more that you'd like to add?
I was gonna say
Mm.
the easy transition here is that I think I've got another take to fire off.
Oh boy.
And
Oh
yeah,
boy. You can't just settle on
it's
you
fine.
can't just
Yeah.
stop with one.
You just listen, you got to keep the momentum going, right? You get one
Mhm.
win, see if you can turn it into two.
Yeah.
Uh, but we know now that freshman Tyzier Denmark has enrolled.
Mhm.
He
We
is,
do.
I believe he's still not listed on the roster. I didn't check before
No,
we
he's
recorded, but he
not.
was not
So
earlier today. Yeah,
yeah. He
but
was just there
I,
at Lift for Life, was running around
yeah,
catching passes, and Tyler Donahue 247. Tyler and I had a conversation. He's like, wait, is that Denmark? And
yeah.
I'm like, I was like, I sat down with him, but it was like a year and a half ago, I think so. And sure enough, it was. So he had literally like just gotten here within the last few days. So Penn State has not announced or acknowledged it yet. Doesn't have a number yet, but yes, this year Denmark is here.
So the take is that
Hmm.
he finishes the top five in snaps for wide receivers this year for Penn State.
Okay. I
Not as
mean,
takey as Cooper Cousins, given the depth, but this is someone that
yeah.
is arriving in June,
Hmm.
right? We heard, as you
Your
said,
boy
we spoke
Dante
to Marcus
Cephas
Higgins
went through
today.
that last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like Marcus Higgins has told us in the past how difficult that is. I think Denmark is that good. I think he has a legitimate chance to play early. I don't want to heap too much pressure on a true freshman who is
Hmm.
again literally not even on the roster yet, but I think there's cause for optimism, I'll say. But as you were about to say, we did speak to Marcus Higgins today at length, and he talked a lot about the leadership and the kind of year to year change. And he, and for like, it's understandable, he didn't go really in depth about any individual guy. He did talk about like Julian Fleming's leadership and everything, and that was when I sat down with Julian, that's something he talked about too, right? Is like he he didn't necessarily say like, "Oh, I'm the guy," or doing anything like that. But he talked about how him and Liam Clifford have kind of been at the forefront of leading that change in the wide receiver room. Which, I mean, we all know it was really important, right? Like they need to be better at wide receiver, whether it's on the field or they're off the field, or like whatever needs to
Mhm.
change. Something needed to change, and Higgins said that like you asked like why it's different, and I thought he gave a reasonable and a good answer about like sometimes you just grow, right? Like and I think we can lose sight of this sometimes. I mean, you and I try really hard not to because it's our livelihoods, but these are kids, right, who are changing rapidly and they're growing up rapidly. And I think that may not be the answer fans want to hear, but I also think that is the most reasonable reason for upgrade this year, right? Like Julian Fleming is replacing Keandre Lambert Smith ostensibly because that's the in and out of the wide receiver position, that
Mhm.
and Dante Cephas leaving, but of the guys who played a lot last year. But so that will be like it's tough to say that's necessarily going to drastically overhaul the room from a production standpoint, but the natural growth that maybe Fleming and Liam Clifford have helped usher along should give fans reason for optimism.
And the health, right? I mean, Julian Fleming's
Right.
healthy.
Especially
Um,
with Trey Wallace.
Trey Wallace, that is another one. James Franklin mentioned him today and said, this is again arguably the most or one of the most explosive players on the roster. He is healthy, and James even said that I think there's some frustration from Harrison Wallace of last year and of not being able to be there. And he hit on the fact that the chemistry between Drew and Trey wasn't there last year in part because of all that time missed. And
Yep.
again, they're both out there this spring, this summer together. So that to me is really, really significant. But yeah, you're right. I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-olds, young adults. Stuff changes
I think
in a
Julian now
hurry.
23 for what it's
I
worth.
was gonna say, yeah,
He's
yeah. I
taking
guess, yeah.
he's taking the
COVID
helm
years,
as
and
the
yeah.
yeah, I think he is the closest in age to me, I think, on the roster now. I think this was the helm that Sean Clifford held for a very long time. When I think when he left, he was only 3 years younger than me, Sean Clifford was. But Julian 23 like has kind of been there, done that with Ohio State. And you could get a sense like when I talked to him that he is very comfortable with who he is, right? And
Mhm.
that's something I think that comes with age, not to be
Oh
like
yeah.
trying to act wise or anything. I'm aware that I'm only 29, but like I think that is as you get older, you see more life and you understand the reasoning of things and how to do things and why to do things. And I think that's a lot of I don't know that it's necessarily like it's got to be this way, you got to do it this way or anything like that with Fleming. It just feels like they're seeing what he does. And it's like, oh yeah, like that makes sense to do it that way, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have
Let
to
me
be this
try
hands-on
this.
approach.
This might help
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
yeah, and
And
I think Fleming, especially like that kind of comfort in his own skin is important. And one of the things he said, sat down with him. This did not make the Franklin story. Won't be another story, but been a major issue for a long time. And like his goal was to be healthy, and he is
mhm.
now, and that's all he really wants.
Yeah, and I think that's and I'm glad you hit on Liam Clifford because that's something that Chuck Losey also mentioned on Thursday in terms of leadership, and that Liam Clifford is a guy, and he said, I think he's been aided by the fact that you have Julian Fleming there to kind of help him along. So that to me is like it's important that you have that. It's also a matter of okay, who else can kind of supplement in that room? Who else can step up? What about Caden Saunders? What about Amari Evans? What about, Peter Gonzalez? Again, another one of those freshmen this year, Denmark. The list goes on and on. I mean, you have Makai Flowers flipping over to the other side of the ball. I mean, there's a million things you can dissect with that. But to me, and the impression I got from Marcus Higgins was that it seems like this is a very healthy take on like, here we understand that fans are criticizing us. We understand that they're criticizing our performance and not necessarily us, the person, which I think is a really good, like, healthy balance in anything, in any
Yep.
point where there's criticism in life. Um, but okay, what are we going to do with that? Well, we can't dwell on it. So how do we go about that? And Andy Kotelnicki said today that one of the things that again, and he obviously can't compare this to last year because he wasn't here, but what's impressed him is he said, okay, every time I'm in my office and I'm walking in, I either see a wide receiver watching film or I see a wide receiver on the jugs or the Monarch machine, either or. So he said, I'm seeing by their actions that they want this to be different. They want it to be better. And to me, that just kind of speaks that like it seems like this room is really on good, stable, healthy footing, despite none of us really knowing what's gonna play out with that group in the fall.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the perspective that he gives is really it's healthy, right? Like that's a good way to put it, that it is a healthy perspective on life and everything that we like. No one is necessarily being critical of Marcus
Mhm.
Higgins, the person, even like Trey Wallace, the person, or whoever. It's about
Yeah.
the performance, and that is
And it
healthy.
should
It
be.
is,
And I know
yeah,
sometimes it spirals with fans, but
yes,
yeah, and
yes,
it's yeah, it
and
should be the
that's
performance.
and with Higgins, like he it just feels like he gets it. And honestly, like I think his reasoning on why they would be better is the most healthy reasoning you can have, right? Like
Mhm.
it's we're just getting older, we're just getting better, right? Like he has this perspective of someone who has just watched guys grow before and is seeing that happen again. You could feel him getting a little bit, I don't want to say fired up, I think that's unfair to him, but a little more maybe intense as he talked about like the frustrations of not wanting to be viewed as like
Mhm.
the weakest link in the chain, right? Like he doesn't want that. He wants to be better, and you could feel him getting, like, you could feel his passion, I guess, probably the best way to phrase it. Like he wants this room to get better, and he's like seeing that improvement. And you can listen, are they going to be the top receiver group in the Big Ten next year? No. Like I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like it's going to be Ohio State's in all
Yeah.
likelihood. I'm sure fans don't want to hear that, but that room is once again loaded. But can this be a top half group in the conference? I think so. And they have to go out and prove it. And that might be all it takes, though, right? They may not need a lot more than that to get this offense to go to the next level.
Yeah, and I think so much of trying to figure out again, because that's what this time of the year is. You're trying to fit the puzzle pieces together. One of the things that Chuck Losey said in terms of, what do you hope to gain from like these next 6 weeks? And he said, like, we got to figure out leadership, and we need to kind of, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but what you have when you exit summer workouts is pretty much what you're going to have throughout the season, right? It's not going to change overnight. Penn State has not named any captains yet, and I'm sure fans are not overreacting to that detail at
Yeah.
all.
Well, I,
Um,
I did want to note too off
mhm.
of that when I spoke to I think James said it, I believe Andy Kotelnicki said it, and Drew said it himself, that like Drew Aller has been more of a leader, and I think that is really important. Now we have to see that, and we have to see what it looks like and how it manifests. But the fact that everyone is kind of on the same page, that that's something that's happening, is promising for Penn State.
Yeah, one of the names that did come up today in terms of leadership, and I was starting to see it when I was watching Lift for Life. Tony Rojas, the linebacker, certainly looks bigger. Chuck Losey wouldn't put a figure on it in terms of weight, but he absolutely looks like a big time Big Ten linebacker. But he's somebody that Chuck Losey said when they're out there during workouts that you can hear Tony's voice, but you can also feel him, feel the energy, the passion, kind of the want to the putting guys in the right positions type of stuff, and that all matters, right? So I think that's one. Another guy we talked with KJ Winston today. I was really impressed talking with him because again, you talk about guys that you and I know both think he's going to be really really good. We've
I think he's the best
both.
safety in the country. While we're just saying how
Gosh,
we feel
you've
about these
got a
takes.
lot of hot takes today,
Yeah,
and
listen, I've been on that Winston bandwagon for a few years. You
mhm,
can vouch for that.
yeah.
I think he's the best safety in the country, and has, listen, safeties don't go as high as they used to in the draft, but I think he has a legitimate chance to go in the first round, and that says a lot.
And he said that being a leader is important to him, and that's something he's really working on this summer, and that the DBs all go bowling together. And they like to invite some other position groups with them. But that's something that they've kind of taken on this summer. And what I appreciated and enjoyed hearing from KJ Winston, I said, well, obviously football rosters are big. How do you get to know? Because he goes, I want to know each one of my teammates. I want to know them, So he said he's like, I'm always in the building saying hi to guys. Hey, how you doing? Or let me sit down and let's eat together, or let's go bowling together. Just those little things that are so instrumental in building a team, an organization, whatever it may be. To me, I was really impressed. Just talking with him, I think his perspective is interesting. And again, yeah, they've got a lot of talent in that secondary. Anthony Poindexter again is a stacked room. We've talked on here about it before, and the safeties and kind of what all that means. So yeah, I do think you're starting to see the groundwork's getting laid for what this team's going to be. And I mean, John, we probably when's the next time? Maybe Big Ten Media Days in late July,
Yeah,
mid or like July 20 something is probably when we see James next, right?
yeah, I think it's July 24th. I don't want
Something
to
like
say that
that.
for sure, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's when it is. But yeah, that'll be the next time, and I'm sure we'll have a whole new round of questions for him, and I would venture to guess you and I now and then. I know it won't be on the Tuesday 25 getting released because I am who I am and I will be taking off work to play that game for 4 days. Uh,
Boy.
Listen, I grew up on it. It's nostalgia for all of us.
Yeah,
But
I
very
might be
excited for
the
that.
only college football writer in the
Yes,
country that does not care about the game at all, but it keeps
ugh,
asking
tough enough.
questions about it for
Yeah,
stories. Yeah.
but no, that's coming up soon. Maybe we'll integrate that somehow into the podcast. Who knows? Maybe everyone
Yeah.
can just watch me turn Texas State into a powerhouse if that's what everyone wants to see. Uh, but I think that's a good place to leave it for now. Like I said, we will get into that whiteout discussion when when that time comes
There
because
is
we
a
both have some
discussion to
takes
be had.
and probably an argument more than a discussion.
Mhm.
Uh, Heated on this podcast for the first time. Who knows? But as I said, you can read Audrey on the Athletic and at the New York Odd Snyder 4. You can find me on Twitter at John Sauber. You can story I did with James Franklin with some quotes from Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen on CenterDaily.com. So go check that out for his kind of perspective on this last decade. But I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.